The scent of grilled hot dogs and freshly cut grass never smelled so sweet. This year, the familiar springtime aroma wafted past my nose as I sat on the bench, watching my son play the sport he loved with a passion that rivaled his mother's eyes. I'm Dr. Marcus Reeves, a 37-year-old emergency physician who dedicates his life to saving others. Yet I felt utterly powerless as I witnessed the heart-wrenching sight of my 12-year-old son, Leo, sidelined while other children took to the field. Leo has his mother's beautiful eyes and my determined jaw. Ever since he could grasp a bat, he has practiced his heart out, hoping to step up to the plate and hit a home run with the whole stadium chanting his name. His determination never failed him, not even when I returned home from 16-hour shifts at the hospital, exhausted to the bone but willing to toss a few pitches for him in the backyard. It broke my heart to see the disappointment in his eyes each time I declined his request. This season was supposed to be his year. He had joined the Westbrook Eagles, a traveling team with a fantastic reputation. Their head coach, Davis, was a serious-looking man with a military buzz cut and a deep voice that could announce the start of the game without needing a microphone. At the parent-teacher meeting, he spoke passionately about the rules and regulations of the game. He had assured us that the children would play according to their skills and performance, and I had believed him hook, line, and sinker. It was the beginning of the season, and guess what? Leo was a bench warmer. He was always among those who warmed the bench, while the others played in the game. I don't know if it was his fault, or if I had somehow upset Coach Davis. Either way, I couldn't bear to watch my son sit through the whole game while the other children played. Leo had practiced day in and out, and he was one of the best players in the team, the assistant coaches had told me. They said he had a natural talent for the game, and his fielding skills were better than most of the other players. His pitching was top-notch, too. It was all a setup, and I had no idea what was going on. The worst was that Leo never complained, and even if he had, I would have blamed myself. I know how it feels to work long hours in the hospital and miss out on spending time with your kids. It's not easy, but it's a part of the job, right? One afternoon, as I was driving Leo home from a game we had lost by a huge margin, he looked up at me and said, "Dad, it's my turn to bat." It was the third game of the season, and I had watched him sit on the bench for almost the whole week. I looked up at Coach Davis, who was standing nearby. When another parent came up to me and said that my son was the best fielder in the team, I had no response. I was speechless. That night, I drove off in silence, and Leo looked out of the window in utter disappointment. I could see the tears rolling down his cheeks, but I had no words to comfort him. It was as if his heart had been shattered into pieces, and I was helpless to do anything about it. I knew it wasn't entirely Davis's fault, and I could understand that Leo needed to be a team player, but I just couldn't bring myself to accept the fact that my son was being sidelined due to circumstances beyond his control. The same children played in every game, while my son sat on the bench, his face hidden behind a clean uniform. Mid-season, Leo stopped talking to me about baseball, and I barely saw him at all. He spent most of his time in his room, doing his homework in silence, and I wondered where the determined little boy had gone. I had seen the worst parts of human life at the morgue, and I had comforted countless parents whose children had died in my care. Still, I didn't know how to reach out to my son or help him through this. Then came the championship banquet, where the final game had been played. The Eagles had won the trophy, but my son hadn't played in almost every game. We were all in the banquet hall, with the parents smiling and talking about how wonderful the season had been. I could barely stand the sight of the trophy on the stage, as Coach Davis gave a speech about the wonderful season we had all experienced. Someone slid a hand along my shoulder, and I turned around to see a familiar face. One of the parents had recognized me and slipped a folded note into my hand. "You need to see this," she whispered before walking away. The woman's name was Margaret, and she had 2 sons who played in the team. She looked as if she had seen a ghost, and I immediately knew something was wrong. Under the table, I unfolded the note with shaking hands and read the words. My eyes widened in shock as I stared at the paper, realizing what it was. Margaret had discovered the team finances records, and she was about to share them with me. According to the paper, families had paid substantial sums of money to have their children play in the games, and those whose names were not on the list had little or no playing time. I sat in stunned silence as I reread the note in my hands. It was all true. The names on the list were familiar to me, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. My family name, Marcus Reeves, was on the list too, right at the end. According to the records, Davis had taken the money and given each child a certain number of playing hours based on their ability to pay. It was illegal and utterly outrageous, and I was furious. My hands trembled as I read through the note, and suddenly, all the events of the season began to make sense to me. The children who rarely played were the ones whose names were at the bottom of the list, with their parents' financial contributions noted in small, inconspicuous writings. Those at the top had paid hefty sums of money, and their children's names were accompanied by various notes about their playing time and roles in the game. I looked up and saw Coach Davis standing by the dessert table, chatting amicably with some of the other parents. His wife was with him, and they both looked prosperous. They probably didn't know what I was holding in my hands, and if they did, they were feigning ignorance. Either way, Davis's secret was out, and it was only a matter of time before he faced the consequences of his actions. I spent the rest of the evening in the banquet hall, staring at the note in my hands. Margaret's eyes were red, and she looked as if she was about to cry. "I'm sorry, I should have shown you this earlier," she said. I looked up at her and gave her a small smile before slipping the note back into my pocket. "It's okay. I understand completely," I replied, turning my gaze back to the trophy on the stage. I was disappointed, but I also felt a surge of anger and determination running through my veins. They had stolen something precious from my son and countless other children, and I would do whatever it took to bring them to justice. Leo looked up at me and frowned as he noticed the expression on my face. "Are you upset, Dad?" he asked. I forced a smile and shook my head. "No, buddies. I'm just happy for you," I said, patting his shoulder. He looked unconvinced but said nothing. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by notes and records as I studied the information Margaret had given me. I had cross-referenced it with the game schedule and was now positive that the children who paid the most received the most playing time. I had a wealth of information at my disposal, and it was time to take action. I wanted to confront Davis immediately, but I knew I had to be careful. If I acted too rashly, I risked getting into an altercation with him in front of all the other children. The next day, I contacted Margaret and told her what I had found out. I assured her that we would get justice for what Davis had done, and she seemed relieved. We set up a meeting with some of the other parents, and I explained the situation to them in detail. They were all horrified to learn of Davis's corrupt practices, and several of them agreed to help me take legal action against him. Margaret and I decided to file a formal complaint with the school board, and we even contacted a few local news outlets to see if they would be willing to report the story. In the days that followed, I spent hours and hours gathering evidence against Davis. I talked to many of the parents, and even managed to secure a few video recordings of our conversations. Some of the assistant coaches had witnessed Davis's corrupt activities and were willing to testify against him. I even found a parent who had played for Davis the previous year and had filed a formal complaint against him. The man said that Davis had been doing this for a long time and that it wasn't the first time he had been accused of such misconduct. One Friday night, I sat in my office and stared at my computer screen. The final draft of my complaint against Davis was open on the screen, and I was contemplating whether or not to send it. This was the most crucial step in bringing him to justice, and I knew that once I hit send, there would be no going back. Margaret had asked me to wait until Monday, but I couldn't do it. Something inside of me pushed me to make this decision, and I knew it was the right thing to do. I looked down at the keyboard and hesitated for a moment before typing in the send command. The screen went blank, and a wave of relief washed over me as I realized what I had done. It was time to put an end to Davis's reign of terror and bring much-needed change to our community. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning. I walked into the meeting room like I owned the place. Leo was at my side, his small hand in mine. Across from me, Coach Davis, his lawyer, and a representative from the district athletic board sat waiting. Coach Davis had the same buzz cut as before, only this time there was no pride in his stance. He avoided my gaze, focusing instead on the documents in front of him, as if their pages held some secret escape. They didn't. The truth was all there, written in black and white. I laid out my case before the board, speaking in a calm, collected manner that hid the storm raging within me. I showed them the spreadsheet, the texts, the damning testimonials from other parents, and the recordings of promises never made good on. Coach Davis's lawyer tried to discredit me at every turn, arguing that the spreadsheet was taken out of context and that the donations were simply voluntary. He had no idea what he was talking about. I had copies of Mrs. Harrison's statements, the parent who had given me the spreadsheet. Her testimony was not just on paper. She had sworn before the board, under oath, that Coach Davis had said donations would influence playing time. The assistant coaches testified next, revealing that several of them had confronted Coach Davis about the issue. One even stated that they had witnessed cash transactions occur in the parking lot after the game. The board members turned to Coach Davis, their expressions a mix of disbelief and outrage. The evidence was overwhelming. It was impossible to deny. It was all a part of a much bigger problem, and it had been going on for years. Coach Davis's lawyer attempted to paint me as some sort of disgruntled parent, jealous of more talented players. He even brought up Leo's batting averages from the season, arguing that he didn't deserve playing time due to his lack of performance. I was seething with anger but kept my cool, addressing the board directly. He never got a chance to prove himself. You can't judge a player based on 3 at-bats when he's barely been given any playing time. You don't think a child deserves an opportunity just because he didn't succeed. I pulled out a video from my bag, showing the board footage of Leo hitting the ball, fielding grounders, and stealing bases with impressive speed and accuracy. The assistant coaches in the video gave him a round of applause, and I turned to face the board again. Does this look like a kid who wasn't good enough to play? Coach Davis spoke up then, explaining that he was only trying to build a winning team and do what was best for the league. I'm sorry, he said finally, but I was just trying to build a winning team. I stared at him in disbelief before standing up, my face contorted in anger. You didn't build a winning team by stealing children's time and money. You didn't build a winning team by manipulating desperate parents. You didn't build a winning team by cheating and lying to us. He fell silent, and a wave of pity washed over me as I looked at this man who thought he had done nothing wrong. He looked defeated, and for the first time I felt no sympathy for him. The board deliberated for 2 hours before summoning me to the room once more. Leo and I stood in the hallway, his fingers fidgeting with the zipper on his jacket. I put a hand on his shoulder, assuring him that no matter what happened, I was proud of him. He looked up at me with bright eyes and said, "Dad, you're a hero." I nearly cried right then and there, but I held it in. The board chairman walked out and addressed me. "Mr. Reeves, we have reached a decision." My heart pounded in my chest as I turned to face him, and Leo gripped my hand. The verdict was unanimous. Coach Davis was banned for life from coaching in the district, and he was forced to return all the money to the families he had defrauded. They also recommended his permanent ban from the State Athletic Association, citing that he should be held accountable for his actions. They apologized to me and the other families, promising to enact stricter policies to ensure this would never happen again. I nodded and thanked them before walking back outside to Leo. We stood in the bright sunlight, the air heavy around us, but we said nothing. It wasn't needed. That evening, we went back to the baseball field, where the next season hadn't officially started yet. Leo picked up a bat and asked me to throw some pitches to him. I did, and he swung, hitting the ball out into the field. He smiled, a real smile this time, and said, "Dad, I want to try out again." I asked him if he was sure, and he nodded. "It'll be okay. Now I know I can do it." I learned a lot through this experience. I learned that sometimes justice isn't served through brute force or a public spectacle. Sometimes it's a quiet act of defiance against those who would take advantage of others. It's speaking up when someone else can't, and it's showing your children that it's the right thing to do, no matter what. Coach Davis may have stolen a season from my son, but he couldn't steal his spirit. He couldn't steal his love for the game. And he most certainly couldn't steal the lesson we learned from this experience, that the scoreboard doesn't dictate who wins and loses, who is good and who is bad. True winners, in the end, are those who conduct themselves honestly and honorably, who rise above the temptation to cheat and lie to get ahead.